They told me the rules were simple. Monitor his vitals, change the dressings, and never, under any circumstances, look him in. They told me the money would erase every debt my family had ever known. But nobody mentioned why 4 physiotherapists had quit in 6 days. Nobody told me my patient wasn't just injured. He was Roman Petrov, the ghost who ran the ports of Vancouver, a man who treated kindness like a trap and trust like a loaded weapon. I walked into that glass fortress above the inlet to save my little brother. But to survive even one night, I had to do the only thing my contract explicitly forbade. I had to break every single rule. The November rain in Vancouver didn't fall. It hung in the air like a grudge. Gemma Sinclair stood under the dripping awning of a closed-down noodle shop on East Hastings, staring at the screen of her phone. The banking app glowed an ugly red, insufficient funds. Below that, a text from a number saved only as UND, 72. Jazz. Then, we take the kid's hands, hard to play piano with stumps. Her little brother, Finley, was 14. He played Chopin with the kind of raw, aching talent that made strangers cry. He was also sitting in their basement apartment in Burnaby right now with a fractured collarbone, courtesy of the last time their mother had failed to make a payment to the Brennan crew. Their mother, Pauline, wasn't evil. She was just a woman whose love for scratch tickets and online poker had grown teeth bigger than her conscience. She'd borrowed against everything: the apartment, Finley's scholarship fund, Gemma's savings, and when legitimate lenders stopped answering, she found Declan Brennan, the kind of man who charged interest in blood. Gemma shoved the phone into her pocket. She was 27, a registered physiotherapist, with a trauma rehabilitation certificate from Vancouver General. She'd spent 3 years rebuilding shattered spines and blown-out knees for athletes who made more in a week than she'd see in a lifetime. She was excellent at her job. Her phone buzzed again. Not the Brennans, a blocked number. Miss Sinclair? The voice was female, clipped and colder than the inlet wind. Speaking. My name is Katya Orlov. You were referred to us through a private medical staffing channel. There's a car at the corner of Main and Kiefer. You have a consultation in 45 minutes. I suggest punctuality. The line went dead. Gemma hadn't applied to any private staffing channel. She'd mentioned her desperation exactly once to a shady orthopedic tech at VGH who claimed to know people who paid cash and didn't file tax receipts. Apparently, the underworld had better networking than LinkedIn. She shouldn't go. Every rational cell in her brain screamed that this was how people ended up as a statistic on the evening news. But then she thought of Finley wincing every time he tried to lift his arm, of the fear in his eyes when the phone rang after dark. She walked to the corner. The car was a matte black Range Rover with windows tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. The rear door opened on its own. Gemma got in. The driver didn't speak. The interior smelled of cold leather and something sharp. Gun oil, maybe, or expensive cologne gone clinical. They drove north out of the city, past the Second Narrows Bridge, climbing into the mountains along Indian Arm where the trees pressed close and cell service flickered and died. They arrived at a gate that looked less like an entrance to a home and more like the mouth of a military installation. 12-foot concrete walls topped with embedded sensors. Cameras that tracked the vehicle with quiet mechanical precision. The gate slid open, revealing a sprawling modernist compound of glass and raw concrete cantilevered over the dark water of the inlet. It looked like a glacier had mated with a weapons factory. Inside, Gemma was led through a corridor of polished concrete to an office that was colder than the rain outside. Katya Orlov stood by a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the water. She was a woman constructed of sharp angles and sharper tailoring, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Gemma's entire education. She didn't offer a handshake. She slid a document across a glass desk. Non-disclosure agreement, Katya said. You sign, you work, you earn. You talk to anyone about what happens inside this house, and we pursue remedies that predate the legal system. Gemma picked up the pen. Her hand was steady. Who's the patient? Mr. Petrov. Gemma's blood went cold. Everyone in Vancouver knew the name Petrov. Not from the newspapers were too careful to print it, but from the whispers. Roman Petrov ran the Petrov Bratva. They said he controlled the shipping lanes from Burrard Inlet to Prince Rupert. They said a man who'd crossed him had been found in a crab trap off Bowen Island, and the RCMP had closed the case in 48 hours. He sustained a severe injury to his right leg and hip 6 weeks ago. Katya continued, unmoved by Gemma's silence. The initial surgery was successful, but his rehabilitation has stalled. He refuses to cooperate. The last physiotherapist departed after 3 days. Departed? Gemma asked. She was escorted out sobbing. She failed to observe the protocols. Katya held up 3 fingers. 1. You conduct therapy sessions at 0900 and 1900 hours. No deviation. 2. You do not speak to him outside of clinical necessity. He is not your friend. He is not your conversation partner. He is your employer. 3. Under no circumstances do you make physical contact with him without his explicit verbal consent. Unless he is unconscious or in medical distress. Gemma looked at the contract. The compensation figure hit her like a freight train. $15,000 a week, cash. 3 weeks. That was $45,000. Enough to pay off Brennan entirely and still have money left for Finley's Music Academy fees. I've worked with difficult patients before, Gemma said, and signed her name. Katya's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Mr. Petrov is not difficult, Miss Sinclair. He is feral. The north wing was sealed behind a reinforced steel door that required a biometric palm scan. Katya pressed her hand to the reader and the lock disengaged with a low hydraulic hiss. You're on your own from here, Katya said. The kitchen is stocked. Your quarters are the first door on the left. His suite is at the end of the hall. He skipped his morning mobility session. Correct it. Then Katya turned and left. The door sealed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. The hallway was dim, lit by recessed strips along the baseboards. The air smelled of antiseptic, cedar, and something metallic. Copper. Blood, maybe. It was quiet in the way that basements are quiet. Not peaceful, just suffocating. Gemma went to her room first, luxurious but sterile like a boutique hotel designed by someone who'd never experienced joy. She changed into her work clothes. Black athletic leggings, a fitted grey pullover, clean runners. She clipped her auburn hair back, checked her bag for resistance bands, her goniometer, and the portable TENS unit, then grabbed the therapy file Katya had left on the hallway console. Inside, MRI scans, surgical notes, and a medication list that read like a pharmacy inventory. She walked to the end of the hall. The double doors to the master's suite were cracked open. Mr. Petrov, she called. I'm Gemma. I'm your new physiotherapist. Silence. Just the sound of rain hammering against the glass wall that formed the entire far side of the room. She pushed the door open. The room was destruction in progress. A side table lay on its back, a lamp shattered beside it. A set of crutches had been hurled into the corner like javelins. In the center stood a massive bed, the sheets knotted, but the bed was empty. Movement by the window. He was standing, barely, with one hand braced against the glass, staring out at the black water of the inlet. All she could see was the outline of wide shoulders, a white t-shirt stretched across a back that looked carved from granite, and sweatpants that hung low on narrow hips. His right leg was encased in a rigid brace from thigh to ankle. Clinical necessity, his voice came, low, raw like stones grinding together in a riverbed. Get out. Gemma stepped forward. Her physio instincts overrode her survival instincts. You've been weight-bearing on that leg without supervision. I can tell from the swelling visible through the brace. If you keep this up, you'll lose the joint entirely. He turned. The motion was controlled but painful, and Gemma's breath caught. Roman Petrov was devastating. Not handsome. That word was too polite. He was the kind of beautiful that felt like a warning. High Slavic cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a January sky over the Rockies. Pale, piercing blue, bright with pain and fury. Dark hair fell across his forehead, damp with sweat. A scar curved from his left temple to just below his ear, old and silver. He was all easily 6'4", and even injured, his body radiated a coiled, dangerous power. He looked like a wolf that had been caged and was seriously considering eating the zookeeper. I didn't ask for a lecture, Roman growled. He limped forward a step, using his size to dominate the space. I asked for silence, and I'm telling you that the edema around your surgical site suggests you've been forcing range of motion without proper warm-up, Gemma said, keeping her voice level even as her pulse hammered. She set her bag on the side table she'd righted. If the scar tissue calcifies wrong, no amount of surgery will fix it. You'll limp for the rest of your life. Let it calcify. No. Roman stared at her, his eyes narrowed. Do you know who I am? I know you're a post-surgical patient with a resting heart rate that's probably 30 beats above normal and a rehabilitation timeline you're actively sabotaging. Gemma fired back, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. And I know you're scared. The room went absolutely still. Scared, he repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. Scared that you won't recover. Scared that your body won't obey you anymore. Every patient who's been through what you have feels it. The difference is whether you let the fear win. For a heartbeat, she thought he was going to throw something at her. His hand twitched against the glass. The tension in the room had weight, like the air pressure before a thunderstorm over the strait. Then his leg buckled, just slightly, a micro-tremor in his quad that betrayed the agony he was masking. He gripped the window frame, knuckles white. You have 20 minutes, he gritted out. If you make it worse, I'll have you removed from this house in a way that discourages future employment. Deal, Gemma said softly. She worked fast. She guided him to a padded bench, assessed his range of motion. abysmal, and began with gentle manual therapy on the surrounding musculature. His leg was a map of surgical intervention, a long incision along the lateral hip, 3 arthroscopic ports around the knee, and bruising that had faded to a sickly yellow-green canvas across his thigh. "Breathe," she instructed as she mobilized the joint. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Without thinking, she placed her free hand on his knee to stabilize the movement. Rule 3, do not touch without verbal consent. Roman's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was iron. His skin was hot. "I didn't say you could do that," he whispered, his face inches from hers. Gemma didn't pull away. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then into his eyes. "I can't rehabilitate your leg through telekinesis, Roman." Using his first name was a gamble. An intimacy she hadn't been granted. His eyes widened a fraction. He stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the dark circles beneath her eyes, the fraying cuff of her pullover, the stubborn set of her jaw. She wasn't trembling, she wasn't backing down, and slowly he released her wrist. "Finish," he muttered, looking away toward the rain, "but if you linger, you're dismissed." Gemma exhaled. She completed the session. Passive stretches, isometric contractions, a cold compression wrap to manage the swelling. When she finished, she documented his measurements. "I'll be back at 1900, she said, packing her things. "Don't bother. I'll be back when the protocol dictates, Mr. Petrov." She walked to the door. "Physiotherapist." She turned. "There's a bottle of Stolichnaya in the freezer. Bring it to me. Alcohol is contraindicated with your pain medication. It thins the blood and slows tissue repair. Bring it." Gemma paused. Then she walked to the small bar fridge in the corner, pulled out the frosted bottle of vodka and walked straight out the door with it. He roared behind her. "Hydrate with water, Mr. Petrov," she called back, "and put ice on that knee." She pulled the door shut, leaned against the corridor wall, and let her legs finally buckle. She slid to the floor, clutching the bottle of expensive Russian vodka to her chest like a trophy. She had survived the first session, and she had just stolen liquor from the most dangerous man in British Columbia. Inside the suite, Roman Petrov stared at the closed door. The throbbing in his hip had dulled to something almost manageable. He looked down at his leg. The wrap was neat, professional. The joint felt marginally looser than it had in weeks. He huffed a dry, rusty sound. "She took my vodka." For the first time in 6 weeks, he didn't feel the urge to put his fist through the glass. He felt something else, curiosity. But curiosity in Roman's world was the first step toward weakness. And weakness, in his world, got people killed. Because Roman knew something Gemma didn't. The injury that had nearly crippled him wasn't from a rival. The bullet had come from inside this house, and by walking through that door, Gemma Sinclair had stepped directly into the crosshairs. By morning, the sky over Indian Arm was the color of wet slate. The rain hadn't stopped. It had simply downgraded from assault to harassment. Gemma hadn't slept. She'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the compound's security grid and the thud of her own heartbeat. At 6 a.m., her phone had buzzed. Brennan's people. 51 hours, love. Hope the kid's been practicing his scales. She deleted the message, splashed cold water on her face, and assembled her armor. The leggings, the pullover, the professional mask. At 08:55, she stood outside his doors. "Enter." Roman's voice came through the intercom, stronger than yesterday, angrier. The room was clean. The silent staff had swept through overnight like ghosts. Roman was in bed, propped against pillows, a laptop balanced on his good knee. He was wearing a black Henley that clung to his chest, and he was typing one-handed, scrolling through what looked like shipping logistics. "You're early," he said without looking up. 5 minutes early is on time. On time is late. Gemma set the therapy bag down. "Breakfast is on the tray. Porridge, blueberries, black coffee, and your anti-inflammatory meds." Roman closed the laptop. He regarded the porridge with the expression of a man who'd been personally insulted. "I don't eat paste, too. Your body is fighting to rebuild connective tissue. It needs fuel that's easy to process." "Eat no, Roman. If you're going to nag me like a wife," he said, his eyes finally locking onto hers. "Sas." Clearer today, sharper, which only made his gaze more dangerous. "At least use my name properly. It's Roman. Not Mr. Petrov, not Sir Roman." Gemma felt heat crawl up her neck. "Roman, eat the damn porridge." He smirked. The expression transformed his face entirely, from predator to something recklessly charming. "You're very brave for someone so small." He reopened the laptop. "Katya ran your background. Gemma Sinclair, graduated top of her cohort from UBC, fired from a private sports clinic for insubordination. You contradicted a senior surgeon's rehab protocol in front of his patient, because his protocol was wrong and would have destroyed the athlete's rotator cuff. Mother, Pauline Sinclair. Gambling addiction. Currently owing $63,000 to the Brennan organization. Brother, Finley Sinclair, 14. Fractured collarbone. Courtesy of Brennan's collectors. Gemma set the bowl down. Her hands were trembling. Is that why you hired me? Because you knew I couldn't refuse. I hired you because you were the only candidate desperate enough to come here who wasn't a plant sent to finish the job someone started on my hip. Roman's tone was casual, like discussing the weather, but hear this, the Brennans are parasites. If you do your work, I will deal with them. I don't need you to deal with my problems. Gemma snapped, pride flaring. I need to do my job, collect my pay, and handle it myself. Stubborn, Roman murmured. He reached for the coffee, ignoring the food. Good. It means you won't shatter when things get noised. They smell blood. That fence outside isn't decorative. He took a sip. So focus on fixing my leg. If shooting starts, stay low and stay close. Gemma stared at him. This was insanity. She was arguing about porridge with a man who discussed impending violence the way normal people discussed parking tickets. If you want to survive a firefight, Gemma said, pushing the bowl back, you need to be able to move, which means you need strength. Eat. He studied her for 5 long seconds. The air crackled between them. He grabbed the spoon, took a bite, grimaced. It tastes like wallpaper paste. It's full of fiber. Good for you. He ate half the bowl, watching her the entire time. When he was done, he held out his arm for the blood pressure cuff. She was close to him now, smelling the soap he used. Cedar and something smoky, like a campfire on a cold night. You have gentle hands, commented as she checked his pulse. I've had a lot of practice on elderly patients. Fragile veins. My veins aren't fragile, he said, his voice dropping. They're stubborn. Gemma pulled back. I need to assess the surgical site. She lifted the hem of his shirt to access the hip. The bruising was a masterpiece of purple, green, and black that spread from his iliac crest down his quadriceps. As she palpated the area, Roman hissed through his teeth. Sorry, she whispered, don't apologize. Pain tells you where the damage is. That's a bleak philosophy. It's a survivor's philosophy. He looked down at the top of her head. Why didn't you run when you heard the name Petrov? Gemma finished her assessment and stood. Because my brother can't run, he can barely lift his arm. And I'm the only person standing between him and the people who did that to him. Roman studied her. Loyalty, stupidity mostly. Gemma sighed. Rare, he said quietly. I'll be back at 1900, Gemma. She paused. At the door. The vodka, he said. Return it. Absolutely not. Until your inflammation markers drop, I outrank you. She walked out. As the door clicked, she heard a genuine laugh from the other side. Low, rough, startled out of him like he'd forgotten how. It was the most terrifying sound she'd heard yet, because it made her like him. And liking Roman Petrov was a mistake that could get her buried under the mountains. By the 4th day, a strange rhythm had formed. The sessions, the arguments over food, the bickering, that crackled with something neither of them named. Roman was improving, grudgingly, furiously, but outside the north wing, the atmosphere was shifting. Katya was tighter. Armed guards patrolled the interior hallways now, not just the grounds. The compound felt like a submarine preparing to dive. It was 1:30 in the morning on Thursday when Gemma woke. She was thirsty, nerves frayed, the bed too unfamiliar. She slipped out of her room in an oversized UBC hoodie and flannel shorts, padding barefoot toward the kitchen. As she passed the communications room, Katya's command center, she heard voices. It has to be tonight. Gemma froze. The voice wasn't Katya's. It was male, nasal, anxious. The boss can barely stand. The physio girl is keeping him distracted. The sensors on the seawall are looped. And the girl? A second voice asked. Kill her too. No loose ends. Brennan wants it clean. Brennan, the same people threatening Finley. They were orchestrating a hit on Roman, and she was collateral. She heard footsteps approaching the door. Panic detonated in her chest. She bolted toward the north wing. She didn't have her palm scan clearance. Her access card was on her nightstand. She reached the steel door. Locked. Damn it, she breathed, tears stinging her eyes. Behind her, the communications room door opened. A man stepped into the corridor. Gregor, the head of the night security rotation. He saw her. His hand moved to the pistol on his hip. Miss Sinclair, Gregor said, smooth and lethal. Shouldn't you be asleep? I heard a noise. I need to check on my patient is fine. Gregor walked toward her slowly. You look upset. Why don't you come with me? He drew the gun. A suppressor was threaded onto the barrel. Gemma pressed her back against the steel door and closed her eyes. I'm sorry, Finn. Click. Hiss. The door behind her slid open. A hand, massive, scarred terrifyingly fast, seized the back of her hoodie and hauled her into darkness. Gemma hit the floor of the suite hard. Roman stood in the doorway wearing nothing but grey joggers, a Sig Sauer in his hand. His face was carved from ice. Gregor froze mid-step. Boss, I was just. 2 suppressed shots. Gregor dropped without a sound. Roman hit a panel on the wall and the steel door slammed shut with a series of locks engaging like a vault. He turned to Gemma. He wasn't the sarcastic, reluctant patient from the morning sessions. He was the reason people whispered his name. "Up," he ordered. Gemma scrambled to her feet, shaking so violently her teeth chattered. "He was the mole," Roman said calmly, engaging the safety. "I suspected. I needed him to move first." He looked at her bare legs, the terror in her eyes, the way she was hugging herself. He stepped closer. "Are you hurt?" "No," she managed. "Good." He winced, grabbing his hip. The adrenaline had torqued his surgical site. He swayed. "Roman!" Gemma lunged forward, catching him as he buckled. He was heavy, all muscle and bone, but she braced against the bed frame and lowered him to the edge of the mattress. "You tore something," she said, her hands already pressing against his hip. "You idiot! You just shot a man and reopened your wound." "He was going to shoot you," Roman gritted out, leaning back against the headboard. "I don't tolerate people damaging my assets." Gemma paused. "Your assets?" "My physiotherapist," he corrected, but the correction was thin. He looked at her then, and the mask slipped, just for a second. Underneath was something raw and unguarded. "Gemma, I need to get the ice and the compression kit." "Wait." He reached up, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. His hand was rough, calloused, but the touch was impossibly gentle. "You heard them mention Brennan?" "Yes," she whispered. "They said the seawall sensors are looped. They're coming tonight." Roman's jaw hardened. The moment of tenderness vanished, replaced by something ancient and ruthless. He pulled himself up, ignoring the pain, and moved to a concealed panel in the wall, a code, a palm scan, and it slid open to reveal a weapons cache and a bank of surveillance monitors. "Katya," he barked into a radio. "Internal breach. Gregor is down. Perimeter compromised on the seawall. Wake everyone." He turned to Gemma. He pulled a Kevlar vest from the rack and threw it at her. "Put this on." "What about you? I don't need a vest." He racked the slide of a tactical shotgun. "I have a very bad temper. Roman, you physically cannot fight." "Your hip." "My hip," he said, limping toward her, "has carried me through worse than this." He covered her hand with his. "Tonight I am not a patient. Tonight I am the thing they're afraid of. Stay behind me. If you see someone who isn't me or Katya, scream." The lights died, the compound plunged into absolute blackness. "They're in," Roman whispered. He took her hand, interlaced their fingers, and pulled her forward. "Move." The corridor was a tunnel of suffocating dark. The only light came from lightning flickering over the inlet, illuminating the rain that lashed against the glass walls like gravel. Roman moved with a silence that shouldn't have been possible for a man his size, especially one with a devastated hip. He held the shotgun one-handed, guiding Gemma with his grip on her vest. They reached the mezzanine overlooking the main atrium. Below, flashlight beams cut through the darkness like searchlights. Voices barked orders. "Clear the ground floor. Find Petrov. Find the girl. They're inside," Gemma breathed. Not for long. Roman stepped onto the landing, silhouetted by a crack of lightning, and he looked like something out of a Norse saga, wounded, furious, and utterly unafraid. "Gentlemen," he roared, "you appear to be trespassing." 3 beams of light snapped up. The shotgun erupted. The lead mercenary at the base of the stairs flew backward, his flashlight spinning across the polished concrete. Gunfire answered from below. Rounds chipped the glass railing near Gemma's head. She screamed and dropped flat. "Move!" Roman hauled her down the east corridor. He fired again, blind, suppressive, keeping heads down while he dragged her into the shadows. His breathing was wet, hitching. The physical cost was mounting. "Utility kitchen," he gritted. "Service lift to the boathouse." They ran. Boots pounded the stairs behind them. They burst into the industrial kitchen. Stainless steel gleamed in the moonlight. Roman slammed the door and shoved a massive prep island against it. "That won't hold," Gemma said, scanning the room. She grabbed a cast-iron Dutch oven from the rack. It was absurd, but it was solid. "Doesn't need to." Roman gasped. He leaned against the commercial refrigerator, sliding to the floor. Blood was soaking through his joggers at the hip, not a stain anymore. A stream. "Roman!" Gemma dropped beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. "You're hemorrhaging. We need to stop." "If we stop, we die," he murmured, eyes flickering. "The lift code, 6219. Stay with me." The kitchen door shuddered as something massive hit it from the other side. Then a gunshot blew the lock apart. 2 men entered, tactical gear, night vision goggles pushed up on their foreheads. "Target acquired," the first one said, raising his rifle toward Roman. Gemma didn't think. She screamed, a sound of raw, unfiltered rage, and launched herself at the man. The mercenary had expected a cowering civilian, not a woman swinging a 7-pound Dutch oven like a medieval mace. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. The iron connected with the side of his head with a sound like a church bell. He staggered sideways, his rifle discharging into the ceiling. The second man pivoted toward Gemma, 2 clean shots from the floor. The second mercenary dropped, a hole in his forehead. Roman was still on the ground, the pistol in his hand steady as bedrock despite his grey complexion. He shifted his aim to the staggering first man. 1 more shot. Silence returned, heavy, and ringing. Gemma stood there, chest heaving, gripping the Dutch oven so hard her knuckles had gone white. She looked at the bodies. She looked at Roman. "You," Roman wheezed, a bloody grin pulling at the corner of his mouth, completely unhinged. "I'm a physiotherapist," she choked, the adrenaline crashing into tears. "I'm supposed to help people heal. You just did." The lights slammed back on. The service lift dinged. Gemma spun, raising the Dutch oven. The doors opened to reveal Katia and 4 men built like concrete pylons, bristling with weapons. "Boss." Katia rushed forward, her composure cracked for the first time. "Perimeter is secured." The rest scattered when backup arrived from the Marine unit. Katia looked at the carnage. She looked at the dented helmet. She looked at Gemma holding the Dutch oven. Did she? Roman groaned, trying to stand and failing. His gun clattered to the tiles. His eyes rolled back. "Roman!" Gemma dropped the pot and caught him. "Get him to the medical suite. Now. He's in hypovolemic shock." The medical suite in the compound's basement was better equipped than most community hospitals in the province. Sterile field, ventilator, blood products in a dedicated refrigerator. For the next hour, Gemma wasn't a debtor's sister or a hostage. She was the clinician. Katia cut his shirt. "You, get me 2 units of O-negative from the fridge." "Move." The men, hardened killers who could snap spines without blinking. She scrambled to follow her commands. Gemma worked with ferocious precision. She stabilized his airway, established rapid IV access, and flooded him with blood products. She cleaned the wound, a catastrophe of torn muscle and fresh bleeding around the old surgical site. A fragment of the original bullet, missed during the first surgery, had migrated and was pressing against the femoral artery. "He needs surgical intervention," she announced, gloves slick with blood. "The fragment is compromising the artery. Every time he exerts himself, it lacerates the vessel wall." "Can you do it?" Katia asked from across the table. "I'm a physiotherapist, not a surgeon. If we wait for a surgeon to reach us up here, he bleeds out." Gemma looked at Roman's face. Pale, still, impossibly young in unconsciousness. She picked up the scalpel. For 35 minutes, the only sounds were the cardiac monitor's rhythmic beeping and the precise snip of instruments. Gemma excavated the fragment, a jagged shard of copper jacket the size of a pea, and dropped it into a metal tray with a clink that echoed. She sutured the artery, closed the muscle, stapled the skin. "BP is stabilizing," she said, watching the monitor. "He's going to make it." She peeled off her gloves and collapsed against the counter. Katia steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "You did well," Katia said. First time she'd spoken to Gemma with anything resembling respect. "Is he going to be okay? He's a Petrov. Too obstinate to die." Katia pulled over a chair. "Sit, drink." Gemma sat, sipping water, watching the rise and fall of Roman's chest. "Katia, who hired them?" Katia's face went grim. She reached into her jacket and produced a phone with a shattered screen. "Gregor's, we cracked it." She handed it over. A text thread. "Unknown sender. The girl is inside. Confirmed. She's the physio. Good." Her mother talked. Told us exactly where the daughter went. "Used the girl to get close to Petrov, then eliminate both. The debt is written off if the mother cooperates." Gemma stared at the screen until the words blurred. Her mother talked. "No," she whispered. "No, she wouldn't. Addicts get desperate, Gemma," Katia said gently, taking the phone back. "Brennan probably threatened to go after your brother next. She traded your location for his safety, or she thought she did." Gemma felt the ground dissolve beneath her. She had entered this fortress to save her family. She had fought off armed mercenaries, performed emergency surgery on a mob boss, and nearly died, all to pay off a debt for a woman who had sold her out. She stood, nausea crashing over her. "I need air, Gemma. You can't go outside. The perimeter isn't fully. I just need to not be in this room." She ran up the stairs into the main living space. The storm had broken. Moonlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, some now cracked with bullet holes, and painted silver streaks across the water below. Gemma curled up on the long grey sectional and wept. She cried for her mother's betrayal, for the blood drying under her fingernails, for the sickening realization that she was safer with a mafia boss, who killed men in hallways than she was with her own family. She didn't hear him approach. She only knew he was there, when a heavy blanket settled over her shoulders. She looked up. Roman was standing there, leaning on a crutch, a proper one this time, pale as fresh snow, wearing clean joggers and no shirt. The new bandages were stark white against his skin, and he was dragging an IV pole behind him. "You should be unconscious," Gemma hiccuped. "So should you," he rasped. He lowered himself onto the sofa beside her. He didn't speak. He just sat there, his presence a solid, warm gravity. "Katia told me," he said eventually. "I'm sorry," Gemma whispered. "They came because of me. They came because they want my territory," Roman corrected. "Your mother was just the tool they used. Don't take ownership of other people's cruelty. She sold me out, Roman. My own mother." He turned to look at her, those pale eyes, dark now, fathomless. "Blood makes you related, Gemma. Loyalty makes you family. Your mother made her choice. He reached over and took her hand. His grip was weak. He'd lost a dangerous amount of blood, but it was possessive. Certain, you saved my life twice tonight, he said. In my world, that creates a debt that cannot be repaid with money. I don't want a debt. I just want to go home. Her voice cracked, but I don't think I have one anymore. No, Roman agreed quietly. You don't. The Brennans know who you are now. If you leave this compound, you're dead. If you go back to your mother, you're dead. Fear flooded back. So I'm a prisoner? No. Roman lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. His eyes never left hers. You're under my protection, and tomorrow we pay a visit to Mr. Brennan. And your mother. You can barely walk. I don't need to walk, Roman said, a cold, precise smile spreading across his face. I have Katya, I have an army, and I have a very angry physiotherapist with a Dutch oven. 48 hours later, the painkillers were fading and Roman Petrov was in a murderous mood. He stood before the mirror in his dressing room, a custom charcoal suit hiding the bulk of the bandages. It couldn't hide the stiffness in his movement or the dangerous pallor of his skin. Gemma stood behind him, arms crossed, wearing a black dress Katya had produced from somewhere. Simple, elegant, a universe away from her clinical leggings. You're compensating on your left side, she said. I can see it in the mirror. Pain is a suggestion. Roman lied, adjusting his cuffs. He turned. The distance that had lived in his gaze since the first day was gone, replaced by a possessive heat that stole Gemma's breath. He reached into his jacket and produced a small velvet box. Inside was a platinum band set with a single diamond that caught the light like frozen water. What is that? Gemma asked. A performance, Roman said. He took her left hand. Brennan respects two things, violence and territory. If you walk in there as my therapist, he sees leverage. If you walk in there as my fiancé, he sees a declaration of war he cannot win. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Just for show, she whispered. Roman didn't answer. He ran his thumb over the diamond, then offered his arm. Shall we? The motorcade, 4 black Escalades, didn't head toward the gleaming towers of downtown Vancouver. They drove east along the Fraser River to an industrial stretch near the port, where the air smelled of diesel, rain-soaked concrete, and rust. They stopped at a corrugated steel warehouse flanked by shipping containers. Katya and 6 operatives secured the perimeter. Inside, under buzzing fluorescent lights, stood Declan Brennan, a thick man in a cheap overcoat with a face like a clenched fist. Behind him, hunched in a plastic chair near a stack of pallets, sat Pauline Sinclair. She looked smaller than Gemma remembered, grayer, trembling. Brennan puffed his chest when they entered. Petrov, heard you were on your deathbed, almost sent flowers. Your taste in floral arrangements is as poor as your taste in assassins, Declan, Roman said, his voice filling the warehouse. He didn't stop walking until he was 3 meters away. Gemma was tucked against his side, the diamond on her finger catching the sodium light. Brennan's eyes flicked to the ring. His smirk curdled. What's with the bird? Thought you were here about her mum's tab. The tab is cancelled. That's not how this works, Petrov. It is when the creditor orchestrates a home invasion and tries to murder me in my own compound. Roman's voice dropped to that gravelly whisper. You violated the accord, Declan. You hired amateurs, you used a rat, and you endangered someone under my protection, he gestured. Katya stepped forward, dragging Pauline by the collar of her worn jacket, and deposited her at Gemma's feet. Pauline looked up, eyes watery with fear and shame. Gemma, sweetheart, you have to understand. They were going to hurt Finley, they said they'd. So you let them try to put a bullet in my head instead? Gemma's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I walked into that house to save you. To save Finn. I nearly bled out on a kitchen floor. And you gave them my location. I didn't know they'd. I thought they just wanted to talk to you. You knew exactly what they wanted, Mum. Gemma looked down at the woman who'd taught her to read, who'd braided her hair for school photos, who'd chosen scratch tickets over her daughter's life. I'm done, Gemma said. She looked up at Roman. I'm done. Roman nodded slowly. He turned to Brennan. You wanted $63,000 for the Sinclair debt. Here's my counter. He raised his right hand, a gold lighter. He flicked it open. Katya and her team raised their weapons simultaneously. The metallic percussion of safeties disengaging filled the warehouse like a drum roll. Brennan's men reached for their waistbands, but they were outgunned 4-1. Easy, Petrov. Easy. We can negotiate. We just did. Roman dropped the lit lighter onto a trail of accelerant on the concrete floor that Gemma hadn't noticed. A wall of flame roared up between Roman's people and Brennan's. Time to go, Roman said, turning his back on the fire and the shouting. They walked out as the fire alarm began to scream. Katya stayed behind to ensure the negotiation reached its conclusion. Outside, the river air was cool and clean, even tinged with smoke. Roman leaned against the Escalade, his face gray, the pain finally winning. Okay, Gemma asked, reaching instinctively for his pulse. He caught her hand. I'm fine. The debt is erased, Gemma. Finley is safe. You're free. Gemma looked at the burning warehouse, then at the ring on her finger. She thought of her basement apartment, the overdue bills, the constant dread. Then she looked at Roman Petrov, the monster of Vancouver, the man who had shielded her body with his own when the bullets came. No, Gemma said quietly, stepping into him, threading her fingers through his. I'm not free. And this ring isn't a performance. Roman searched her eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for the lie. He found nothing but steel. You break every rule, little physio, he murmured. Only the ones that don't matter. He pulled her in, arm around her waist, ignoring the protest of torn flesh. He kissed her, hard, deep, right there on the docks under the grey Vancouver sky, with the mountains watching and his army pretending not to look. It tasted of smoke, rain, and a future that was terrifying and bright, in equal measure. She had walked into the lion's den a victim. She was walking out a queen. And God help anyone who tried to touch what was hers. That is the story of how Gemma Sinclair went from drowning in debt to standing beside the most feared man on the Pacific coast. A twisted tale that proves loyalty isn't about bloodlines. It's about who's willing to bleed for you, and sometimes the safest place in the world is in the arms of the most dangerous person in the room. If you enjoyed this dark, twisted mafia romance, smash that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Drop a comment below. Do you think Gemma made the right call? And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thanks for watching.